A lot of organizations think they have an accountability problem. People are not following through, managers are chasing updates, work sits between people, deadlines slip, ownership feels blurry, and the response is usually predictable. More pressure, more tracking, more follow up, more talk about ownership. But often that diagnosis is wrong because many accountability problems are not character problems, they are design problems. Because that can sound softer than people expect. It is not. It's actually more serious because if accountability is weak, the first question should not be who is not stepping up. The better question here is what in the system is making ownership harder than it should be. Here, a lot of leaders talk about accountability as if it lives inside attitude. And if some people have it and some people don't. But at work, accountability is not only a personal quality, it is also an operating condition. People need to know what they own, where that ownership starts, where it ends, what decisions they are allowed to make, what they can decide without asking, what must be escalated. Without that, be more accountable becomes just a saying. And this is not just opinion. If we look at CIPD's 2025 job design fact sheet, it's very useful because it treats roles and responsibilities as part of performance itself, not just HR administration. And that matters because it means role design is not secondary thing. It's a part of whether work functions well at all. So when I hear leaders say we need more accountability, I usually want to slow the conversation down because sometimes what they are saying is not a motivation issue. It is a design issue wearing behavioral language. Let me make it practical. Like if roles are unclear, accountability weakens. If decision boundaries are unclear, accountability weakens. If people are responsible for outcomes but do not control the method, timing, or trade offs, accountability weakens. At the same time, if work keeps crossing unclear boundaries, that also weakens accountability. That's not soft, that's design logic. And this is where a lot of organizations get trapped. They assign responsibility, but they do not assign enough control. So people become answerable for outcomes they do not fully have the authority to shape. That creates hesitation. Yeah. At the same time, it creates waiting and escalation. And they might be looking for cover seeking. And then leaders call it low ownership. But at the first place, structure created the pattern first. Responsibility without real control is not accountability. This is where the OECD lens helps. The OECD treats autonomy as one of the key resources in job quality. In simple terms, people need enough room to act if they are expected to accomplish their duties well. So if autonomy is too low and control sits too far away from the work, accountability gets weaker almost by design. And that is the contradiction a lot of systems create. How they say on the outcome, but they also say wait for approval, check first, escalate that, stay in your lane, don't decide too early. So now responsibility sits in one place, authority sits somewhere else. And people learn very quickly that being accountable is risky when decision rights are blurry. Responsibility without real control is not accountability. That is why I do not like treating accountability as a pure behavior issue. Because behavior is often a response, a rational response. If the system makes clean ownership difficult, people adapt. They wait, they hedge, escalate, they copy more people into the email. They ask for alignment before moving. And then leaders look at that pattern and call it low accountability. Maybe, but often the pattern started much earlier. And a lot of time it breaks at the seams, not inside one role, between roles, between teams, between functions, between approval and execution. Might be between formal ownership and actual moment of the work. That is where accountability quietly disappears. One person thinks the next step is theirs. The other person assumes it is still with the first team. Manager is technically accountable, but the real decision sits 2 levels higher. A team owns delivery, but not the trade-off that determines whether the delivery can move. This is where work starts stalling. Not because nobody cares, because the design made clean follow through too ambiguous. And this is where MIT management review is useful. Their 2025 piece on low team accountability tells leaders to ask what is in the team's way. That is a much better question than simply demanding more ownership. Because when accountability is low, obstacles matter, decision conditions matter, clarity matters. This is more mature diagnosis. And I think that is the shift. Stop treating accountability as a morale lecture. Start treating it as a design outcome. Now, that doesn't mean people never avoid responsibility. Of course they do, but if the same pattern keeps repeating across people, across teams, across projects, then at some point you have to stop personalizing it. You have to ask, what conditions keep reproducing this? And usually I see 4 conditions underneath weak accountability. The first one is role clarity. People may have titles, they may have job descriptions, they may have reporting lines, but still many not have real ownership clarity. And those are not the same thing. A title tells you where someone sits. It doesn't always tell you what they fully own. So, two capable people can both be involved, both committed, and still reach a moment where neither is fully sure. Is this actually mine? This is not an effort problem. This is a role design problem. The second one is decision rights. If a person is responsible for movement but cannot make the decisions that are needed to create that movement, then accountability weakens immediately. Why? Because responsibility without decision authority is not clean accountability. It is exposure, and people can feel that. Third one is head-offs. A lot of accountability doesn't feel inside the task. It feels when ownership transfers. One person finishes their part, someone else is meant to pick it up, but nobody defined the exact moment it becomes theirs. Nobody defined what ready means. Nobody clarified the standard. What happens? The work sits in the gap. And then leaders ask why nobody owned it. But often the real issue is the system never made the transfer visible enough to own. Fourth one is guardrails. And this matters because the answer is not chaos in the name of empowerment. Autonomy works better when people know the constraints they are operating inside, what they can decide, what they must escalate, what trade-offs they can make. This is how you get serious accountability. Not by removing all the structure, by designing the right structure. So the fix is not here, not the louder pressure. It is better design, clear role boundaries, cleaner decision rights, less contested ownership, better head-offs, better guardrails, fewer situations where people are answerable without real authority. Responsibility without real control is not accountability. And once you see that, something else becomes clear. A lot of what gets called an accountability problem eventually becomes a culture problem. Because if people live inside a badly designed system long enough, they adopt their behavior. They stop moving early, they escalate more, they protect themselves, they avoid sharp decisions. They learn that safety matters more than ownership. And over time, that becomes the culture. This is why I keep saying culture is not a program. It is not the poster on the wall. It is not the workshop. It is not the motivational talk at all. Culture is the pattern of behavior the system keeps producing, tolerating, reinforcing, and rewarding. So if the system keeps producing hedging, over escalation, weak follow through, and blurred ownership, then that is culture people will keep experiencing. And that is why accountability matters so much, because it sits right in the middle between structure and behavior, between design and culture, between formal responsibility and actual movement. So when a leader says we have an accountability issue, my response usually is maybe, but first show me the design, show me the role boundaries, show me the decision rights, show me the handoffs, and show me what people are rewarded for, where authority really sits, and where your managers what your managers do when pressure hits. Because if those things are weak, the accountability issue is already being produced before anybody says a word. And that is the deeper reason blame so often fails. Blame may produce short term fear, but it doesn't produce clean ownership inside a badly designed system. Only design can do that. Design plus expectations, design plus guardrails, design and managerial discipline. So, yes, accountability matters a lot, but most organizations are trying to fix it too late. They notice it at the behavior level when 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 they really should diagnose it at the design level. That's a shift I want leaders to make. Don't ask only why are people not stepping up. Ask what conditions are making clean ownership harder than it should be. That question is more uncomfortable, but it is also much more useful. Because once you redesign the conditions properly, something changes. Accountability stops being something you keep demanding. It becomes something the system makes possible. And once you see that clearly, the next question becomes obvious. If accountability depends so much on clarity, authority, and boundaries, then what exactly does good work design look like in a changing organization? Especially now when roles are shifting, AIs entering workflows, and work is crossing more boundaries than before. That's where I would go next. Thank you for listening.